In our money lead, the uncertainty created by the president's tariffs has many Americans clamping down on their spending. That is according to a new report from the U.S. Commerce Department. Retail sales, they fell by almost 1% in May compared to April's, the steepest monthly drop since January, and it was a lot worse than many economists projected. I want to bring in my panel now to discuss. Aisha, I want to start with you because I've heard from a lot of Trump econ team folks saying you guys all predicted the worst things, and it hasn't actually happened yet. Is it happening now? What's your sense?
Well, I mean, I think we're seeing some signs of the softness, right? Like, I think what happened was you had people, like, who were very concerned about the tariffs, so they went out and they bought a lot of stuff. And so then you can go, oh, look, it didn't happen yet. But now you see people pulling back. People are concerned about these prices. And sometimes it takes a lot of time for these measures to catch up to what is actually happening in the economy. Like, for instance, like jobs are a lagging indicator. Often it's after a recession has ended when unemployment peaks. So you have to be, like, very careful about just looking at the day to day. Like, the gravity still matters. If you make things more expensive, they are more expensive. Like, that's just a fact.
Noted believer in gravity as it relates to tariffs, Marc Short. We saw something Democratic Senator from New Hampshire, Jeanne Shaheen, posted today. Americans understand the tariffs drive up prices on everyday goods at a time when families are already grappling with high costs. The president's trade policy is throwing our economy into unnecessary turmoil. Marc, my question is, does any of this funnel into the debate that's happening on Capitol Hill right now? You've run ledge affairs for a White House, and I think what the environment and the atmosphere is important. Sometimes it maybe counterintuitively actually helps move something forward, but what's your sense of what you're hearing from Republican senators?
I think there's a lot more anxiety about the economy in the second half of the year that I do think is pushing to say we need to get this done sooner rather than later. I do think that there has not been some of the dramatic price increases that many expected, but I think some of the biggest retailers pre-purchased inventory in anticipation of that. And so there's an expectation that the second half of the year you're going to see the impact a lot more dramatically. And I think Republicans want to get the tax relief package done before there's the more turmoil in the discussion and in the economy.
Yeah, it was kind of the wrench in the White House saying, this is a great GDP report because all it's showing is the inventories, and that's why it was negative. And it's like, yeah, well, that also means people are building up. The one big, beautiful bill.
Beautiful.
You're jealous you didn't name it.
I am.
And I am cognizant of that fact. I think one of the things that I've been trying to figure out right now is from a kind of political dynamics perspective. And Marc knows as well, there's a White House perspective of, you have to vote for this eventually. We will wear you down. How operative do you think that is?
Well, here's the challenge, though. The White House, the president's not going to face voters again. But if you are up in the midterms, part of what you're trying to hold out for is the ads write themselves right now, because not only we're talking about, concern about the economy. There's uncertainty in the economy. There's uncertainty in the global economy. What's happening with Iran does not make it any better. We're probably not going to get another rate cut from the Fed. And so if you're then talking about cuts to health care, to programs for kids, for food and for services, and pushing those costs down to states, people are going to feel that. And so that is only going to deepen the anxiety. So, yes, the White House is going to do everything they can to wear people down. But it's incumbent on, certainly I think, my Democrats here to really keep the pressure on and to do everything they can to wedge Republicans in and make sure they pay a political price when it comes to the midterm elections.
I'm going to go to Aisha because Marc, I know, has like 15 years of responses to every single one of those issues.
I can feel it.
It's like a muscle memory.
I'm ready.
That he has. When you talk to officials inside the White House, around the White House right now, how are they thinking this is all going to play out? Do they just not take Ron Johnson seriously, don't really care about Rand Paul? How does this work?
Well, I mean, I think the idea is that they will be able to pressure them, right? That they have the political will to say, look, this is what your base wants. And this, what else do they have, right? Like, if you don't get this done, what have they delivered for the American people other than, like, tariffs and maybe some uncertainty in the Middle East? Like, so it's like you have to deliver something before the midterms. You're not going to get anything else. So here's what you got. And tax cuts are what we're selling. Now, the big issue for them is that there is this idea from some people like Ron Johnson and others that this is going to explode the debt at a time when should we really be spending all this money? It's not an emergency. And in the past, people are always talking about their grandchildren and stuff like that. We're passing on this debt. The deficit is getting bigger and bigger. And I think that is something that people are trying to bring up at this point.
I will say tariffs and uncertainty in the Middle East is not necessarily the bumper sticker that that you're going for
No,
when you
no.
go into this. Marc, we saw in New York today, and this was, in New York City, most of us are probably not paying attention to what's going on day to day, but it connects with a couple of things we've seen over the course of the last several weeks, including with Senator Alex Padilla and Kristi Noem. He addressed that issue on the floor. I want you to listen to this.
I was forced to the ground. First on my knees, and then flat on my chest. If a United States senator becomes too afraid to speak up, how can we expect any other American to do the same?
Very emotional floor remarks, but I think contextually it was also, we saw this in New Jersey. We saw this with the comptroller today in New York. What's your sense of how Republicans feel about what they've seen play out?
Well, I think that in the Senate, it's generally a body that looks to protect each other. And so I would imagine there's a lot of discomfort in the Senate when something like that happens to one of their colleagues. I think it is a club in which they want to protect each other there. I think that more broadly, look, I think there's even a growing sense of, beyond these instances, what obviously happened in Minnesota is that there's much a greater and greater amount of political violence today that really should be condemned universally.
I had the opportunity to speak with Senator Padilla a few hours after the incident happened, and it was stirring because he was talking about having to explain to his children what they just saw happen to him on television. And his point that, as he made on the floor, we can't be bullied. He had been escorted over there by an FBI agent, by a member of the National Guard. They knew exactly who he was. The comments that Kristi Noem was making right before he walked in, talking about the leadership of the state and the city. We don't need that. And look, we should do away with this kind of hateful rhetoric, this kind of violent rhetoric. But from my perspective, obviously, there's one side in particular. You heard it from Donald Trump earlier today when he was attacking Tim Walz. We have to hold leaders accountable for their behavior as well and for their language, particularly because we live in an era where we know there are crazy people out there who can figure out where you live and could show up with a gun. That's reality.
Certainly seen that the last couple of days. Karen, Marc, Aisha, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.